Hey, Bastish here for 64K, and welcome to another episode of the Commodore 64 and...
Welcome to 64K, hosted by Bastish B.
And welcome back. So on today's episode, we're going to have a look at all the Aliens games on the Commodore 64. But before we do that, let's take a brief little look at the history of the franchise itself. The Alien movie franchise is a science fiction series focusing on the main character Ripley, for the most part, as she battles and tries to survive the wrath of the aforementioned aliens.
You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
The Ripley storyline contains 4 films starting in 1979 with Alien, 1986's Aliens, 1992's Alien 3, and finally 1997's Alien Resurrection.
Come on! Come on! Gotta get it, baby! Come on! Get
All the movies in the original storyline were directed by very well and respected and talented directors, including Ridley Scott, James Cameron, David Fincher, and Jean-Pierre Jeunet. The original series grossed over $700 million in box office sales over its entire run, leading to 2 prequels being made in 2012 and 2017, namely Prometheus and Alien Covenant. The alien creature also appeared in 2 spin-off movies, which incorporated another much-loved alien character, the Predator. These movies are 2004's Aliens vs Predator and 2007's Aliens vs Predator Requiem, both pretty mediocre movies by most respects.
I'm shocked.
Video games have obviously played a big part in complementing the movie ever since 1982's Atari 2600 release. Countless games have come out over the years on every system imaginable, from the C64, MSX, PC, Game Boy, arcade, and Xbox One, and the franchise is still alive and kicking to this day. Okay, so let's look at what games we're going to check out today. And today's games are 1984's Alien, 1986's Aliens the computer game, 1987's Aliens, and 1992's Alien 3, all on the Commodore 64. And very briefly before we get started, I've got a few other episodes in this series already, so please check them out if you're interested in this kind of content. Now let's start checking out all these games and movies. The movie Alien blasted its way onto cinema screens in 1979. No doubt greenlit after the massive success of Star Wars and people's hunger for more blockbuster science fiction action. It was directed by now veteran director Ridley Scott, who went on to many classics such as Blade Runner and Black Rain, to name a few of my personal favorites. Alien was no Star Wars. It was gritty, dark, claustrophobic, and dripping in suspense around every corner. It was a movie made for a measly $4.2 million and went on to gross $80 million just in its initial US theatrical run, obviously paving the way for some of the sequels we'll be looking at shortly. The story involves the crew of the spaceship the Nostromo responding to an SOS out in deep space. Yeah, never a good idea. Long story short, an alien gets on board and starts hunting and killing everybody on the ship. It was horror and science fiction mixed perfectly and sent chills down your spine at every turn. It was written by the late Dan O'Bannon, who worked on other classic movies such as John Carpenter's Dark Star, Heavy Metal, and Life Force. The alien creature design was by Swiss artist H.R. Giger and is one of the elements that could have made or broke the movie in a big way. Fortunately, it was so unique and creepy that it changed alien designs forever. And if you want to see more of Giger's work, check out the surreal point-and-click adventure horror games Darkseid 1 and 2 for more of his macabre creations. And lastly, the cast, including the late great Harry Dean Stanton, Tom Skerritt,
Open the hatch!
Ian Holm, and of course Sigourney Weaver in her big screen debut as
Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
This movie is just brilliant. The cinematography, set design, music, acting, everything just comes together so well.
Listen to me. If we break quarantine, we could all die.
And if you've never seen Alien before, then I'd highly recommend checking it out. In the dark, of course. By yourself, for the maximum effect. You just may not sleep well later. And now let's jump on over to the first C64 game. Alien was released in 1984 by August Press Software on multiple home computer formats of the time, including the ZX Spectrum and C64. August Press weren't a big software house, and how they landed the rights to Alien is anyone's guess. They are probably best remembered though for the detective game on the C64 and the strategy title Johnny Reb 2. Their take on the movie Alien was pretty ambitious, especially for a 1984 release. It was a real-time strategy approach, as the game picks up right after the chestburster scene in the original movie. The alien is on the loose and people are starting to die. The object of the game is to kill the alien by either blasting it out of an airlock or setting the ship to self-destruct and beelining it for the escape pod. The ship itself is pretty big, with 3 levels and an overall 35 rooms to explore. You get to control all 6 crew members as you attempt to flush out the alien. Items can be found all over the ship to defend yourself against the xenomorph. The characters also act according to their morale and can go completely off the rails. They can lose morale, for example, if they have a really weak weapon to defend themselves with, or if maybe they just witnessed the death of another crew member. Finding Jonesy the cat is also a big asset, as he can be captured and used as an alien tracking device. And if you see him randomly running across the bottom of the screen at any point, he was obviously just spooked by the aliens, so beware. The game is a bit of a scavenger hunt, as you never know where the alien really is, and your plans are probably going to have to change at the drop of a hat. The game's menus are simple enough, but it's going to take a while to get used to it and to figure out how to do things in this game. You can play it in 2 ways. You can play the full game where you control all 6 members of the crew, or short scenario, which has you only taking care of 3 of the crew members. And of course this method is totally recommended for your first time playing it, or at least to get to grips with the game. The game was originally designed and programmed for the ZX Spectrum, hence the graphic style, although it's definitely better looking and sounding, with a decent intro tune and some good sound effects that are used really well in the scenarios. I think this was a pretty bold attempt to capture the atmosphere of the movie, and in some respects they did a pretty good job. It's just a pretty hard game to get to grips with control wise, and the pace is obviously generally pretty slow, although it is a far cry better than the Atari 2600 version, which was basically just a variation on Pac-Man. If you're willing to put in the time and effort, then this game is a bit of a surprise, and a pleasant one at that. Now let's fly on over to the sequel, Aliens, which pulse rifled its way onto cinemas in 1986 under the direction of James Cameron, who wrote and directed this masterpiece of science fiction action. He started writing the script because there was a delay in starting to shoot the first Terminator movie due to Arnold's commitment to the second Conan movie.
Enough talk!
He submitted the script to Fox and they loved it and basically said, if Terminator is a hit, we'll greenlight the movie. And the rest is history.
I'll be back.
I like the first movie, which pitted a non-combat ready crew against a single menace. This one pitted a veteran group of Marines against thousands of alien threats. Ripley's back as she gets awoken 57 years in the future from a Nostromo escape pod. She ends up going back to LV-426, where her crew originally found the alien egg, with a group of Marines, to see why the colony had lost contact with the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Needless to say, the aliens have multiplied in the 57 years since Ripley encountered them, and the colony is wiped out, which kickstarts the action roller coaster ride that just doesn't let up to the bitter end.
Get away from her, you bitch!
This is without a doubt my personal favorite science fiction movie of all time. Just everything about it is perfect, including another top-notch cast including Michael Biehn,
There's nothing back here!
Lance Henriksen,
Is there a problem?
and the late great Bill Paxton.
What is it, Private?
How do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?
Endlessly quotable dialogue,
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
an excellent score, more amazing set design, and excellent suspense and action round out a must-see movie which is arguably better than the first.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
The movie's budget was 18 million, still quite small by today's standards, but it went on to gross 180 million worldwide, which made further sequels a foregone conclusion. Now let's switch gears and take a look at both Aliens games on the Commodore 64. The first Aliens game, titled Aliens the Video Game, was released in 1986 by Activision. It was the first Aliens game on the C64 and is commonly known as Aliens US, as it was made by American software house Activision. The game was designed by Steve Cartwright, a veteran Activision programmer responsible for games like Frostbite, Hacker, and Mega Mania. It's essentially a collection of mini-games, each representing a critical part of the movie. Also interspersed between these are cutscenes, with dialogue and digitized stills from the movie which tie all the mini-games together. Each of the 6 segments offer a different gameplay style, or at least a variation on the levels, and are really fun to play. After the cool musical intro with a title sequence similar to a movie trailer, the mission is set up just like the movie, with the first level replicating the jump ship landing sequence, and it's pretty clear Activision definitely used some assets from their excellent Master of the Lamps game for this. But nevertheless, it's a fun, if a bit hard start as you try to stay within the rings as you descend and land on LV-426. The next segment is the first encounter with the Xenomorphs as the team tries to get back to the armored personnel carrier. This sequence is really intense, with good action, and I just love how the tracking device is used to amplify the tension. Next is the sequence where the Marines are welding the doors shut, and you have to defend the area until the job is done. Next is the escape through the vent ducts as the aliens are after you. It plays like Pac-Man as you try to make your way through the maze while avoiding aliens. You have a limited amount of grenades to defend yourself. Make every one of them count, trust me. The next one is my personal favorite as you control Ripley as she makes her way into the alien hive to rescue Newt. Not only do you have to find her, but also defend against the aliens, and you've only got 17 minutes before the dropship nukes the facility. It's very cool, and you even have a limited amount of flares which you can use to mark your way back, just like the movie. The final level is the smackdown between Ripley and the alien queen as she pilots the forklift exoskeleton. You basically bash her enough in the head until the opportunity comes where you can grab her and blast her out the airlock. This game is just damn good in every aspect. The graphics are cool, as are the very satisfying sound effects. The opening tune is really atmospheric. I love the mix of gameplay styles. It really makes the game so much fun, as you're never really sure what's coming up next. Zap64 gave this game 66% overall in issue number 5, which was completely unjust in my opinion. Even what their overall thoughts was is oddly contradictory. They said, "The enormous potential of the film hasn't been utilized." Total nonsense. But the package is good in its own right. Okay, so what's with the 66% then, Zap? Regardless of that, it's a fantastic game, and if you like the movie, you're gonna really enjoy it. And now let's check out the second game based on Aliens, which was released in 1987 and is commonly known as Aliens UK, as it was made by British software developer Electric Dreams, who did a bunch of movie conversions to 8-bit computers at the time, like Big Trouble in Little China and Back to the Future. Their take on Aliens was completely different to Activision, opting for only one gameplay style instead of the mini-games approach. The game is basically a squad-based first-person action game. You are the overseer from the movie, watching all the Marines and Ripley from their helmet cams, and you can jump into any of the 6 characters and control them. The goal, like the movie, is to find the Queen and destroy her. Finding the Queen, however, is no easy task, with a facility made up of 255 rooms and no in-game map. So you better pull out that pen and paper if you haven't got an original version of the game. You can restock ammo and medical supplies in the appropriate rooms, blast any aliens you come across. Just make sure you don't shoot any of them in front of a door, because sometimes they leave a little bit of acid on the ground, and you could screw up your whole game if you're not too careful. Locked doors can be blasted open, and you can also lock them behind you to put a team member into a safe area as you switch to another character. The characters also get fatigued, so it's essential that you swap between them to give others a rest. And it also eliminates the gung-ho approach of you trying to just do the whole thing with one character. The graphics really capture the movie well, with dark and depressing tones, and the cool helmet cam view is impressive. There is no music, just sound effects, which work pretty well, with the tracking device and the gun sound adding a lot of intense atmosphere into a game that has you stressing out over every door you open. If you ever played that 3DO Space Hulk game from the 90s, then this is very much how it plays out, and it's a really well done effort and definitely captures the atmosphere of the movie. My only major gripe with the game is the lack of a map feature within the game, and unless you have the original version of the game that comes with a mini-map, then you're pretty much screwed. I know most games back then usually didn't bother with them, but playing this in retrospect, it's extremely difficult to get anywhere without one. I would definitely look out for a map from one of the old 80s gaming mags and check that out. It's the only way you're going to get anywhere in this game, and I actually used one of them originally in the 80s to play it. Besides this gripe, it's a really cool game and much harder than the Activision version, but still a pretty good entry. Zap64 gave the game 81% overall in issue number 24, and it's another really good entry for the C64 Aliens games. 6 years after the massive hit that was Aliens, Alien 3 burst onto the screens in 1992. The sci-fi horror movie was directed by David Fincher, who up until that point had only done a bunch of music videos. This was his big screen debut. Talk about pressure. David would obviously go on to a massive career in film, with Fight Club and Seven being just some of his cinematic gems. The story of the movie picks up as Ripley's second escape pod snafu, which leaves her stranded on the planet Fiorina 161, which is home to a massive maximum security prison, where the worst of the worst inmates are kept. Newton Hicks are dead from the apparent crash landing, but Ripley knows an alien must have got on board and tries to convince the prison authorities of the threat.
Stop this raving at once!
I'm telling you! It's here!
It goes on deaf ears until the warden is whacked and all hell breaks loose. The movie goes back to its roots like the original, with one alien on the loose systematically murdering everyone. It's a pulse-pounding assault on the senses as they try to kill it without the use of weapons.
We have no weapons of any kind.
Due to the prison's no firearms policy. Popular opinion is that this movie is pretty bad. I completely disagree though. It's very much like the next entry in the series, Alien Resurrection. If you watch it as a standalone movie, you're gonna be in for a good popcorn time, but if you get all caught up in the fact that Newton Hicks are dead, you're probably not gonna enjoy it. The movie had major issues though during production, everything from budget, script rewrites, and massive studio interference, which led David Fincher to officially disown the movie as not part of his filmography. Despite everything, the cinematography, lighting, set design, pace, and the extremely good and diverse cast of misfits make it another awesome flick I'd highly recommend. And if you want to talk about bad alien movies, then please check out Prometheus for a much better example of style over substance. Okay, so run either left or right. Seriously, left or right, anytime guys. It's falling straight on you. Left, right, no, maybe, no. The movie racked in $55 million at the US box office, which was slightly disappointing at the time, but the international takeaway was over $100 million, which made it another massively financially successful movie, despite popular opinion. Now let's go over and see how the final C64 Alien game fared up. Alien 3 the game was published by Acclaim in 1992 on many 8 and 16-bit systems, with programming duties done by C64 veterans Probe, who were knocking out great C64 games like no tomorrow. It was a pretty late C64 release, coming right near the end of the Commodore's commercial games releases. I never played this one back then because I got the Mega Drive version and absolutely loved it. This C64 version is a slightly smaller but still very impressive version of that. It's a scrolling action-adventure game where you as Ripley have to save the prisoners of Fiorina 161 that have been captured by aliens all over the prison facility. The game takes a real loose approach to the plot, with the setting and prisoner aspect being the only things kept. They wisely decided to mix Aliens and Alien 3 together, as you get the whole facility infested with thousands of xenomorphs, and unlike the movie, which has no real weapons, Ripley is equipped out with all the awesome gear from Aliens, with pulse rifle, grenades, flamethrower, and grenade launcher all at the ready. The game features 15 massive levels where you have to traverse a certain area in the facility against the clock, rescuing prisoners before their chests explode. Every few levels you'll also be facing off against a giant queen style alien, so make sure you keep those grenades on hand because they take a lot of punishment to take down. The graphics are a really good conversion of its 16-bit big brother, and the music is quite excellent. C64 Sid legend Matt Furness did the music for the Mega Drive version, which is absolutely fantastic, and you can check that out in one of my episodes of Wired for Sound. Ironically, he didn't do the C64 music here, but the tunes have been replicated in C64 Sid Glory, and they are extremely good versions of them, both the atmospheric ones and the FOSS-based numbers. The game was received really well across the board, with Commodore Force in issue number 12 giving the game an overall 93%, saying it's a first-class tie-in, grade A conversion, and wicked action adventure no gung-ho xenomorph should neglect to own. This is a really good game overall. Fast, frantic action, packed with fun. That was a really excellent way to end the C64 Aliens games, and definitely going out in style. So how does the Aliens games fare up on the Commodore 64? I think you got a pretty good selection of games here. I love the fact that, you know, older games you could have different companies making different versions. I really miss that kind of thing. There's a lot of that happening in the 80s, especially on the C64. I wish new games could still employ these kind of tactics. I know that rights and all that kind of stuff just gets in the way of everything, but they were able to do it back then, so I don't know why they can't do it now. It would be awesome to get like 2 different games, completely different, made by completely different companies, about, you know, a franchise that you really enjoy. It's such an interesting approach. I think it's cool. Obviously the first game is the weak link in the bunch. It's not a terrible game at all. It's just really hard to get into. The graphics are obviously basically a Spectrum game, so if you don't like that look, you're going to be put off. But it is a deep game and very challenging, and it's very clever. It's well designed. The 2 Aliens games are quite excellent as well. They're both completely different. That's what I was talking about earlier. I think that's just a cool approach. I like both of them for completely different reasons, and they're both worth checking out. And the final game I never played originally on my Commodore 64 back in, you know, the early 90s, because I bought, like I said earlier, the Mega Drive version. So obviously that was the one I played, and I didn't even realize it came out on the C64, because the C64 games are coming quite hard to get where I used to live in the early 90s, so I didn't even know they actually released it for the system. But playing it now in retrospect, it's a very good version of the Mega Drive one, and it's quite impressive. Overall, I think the franchise is very lucky. If you're a Commodore 64 owner, you got a lot of good Aliens games to check out. So again, thanks for joining me, Bastish B, at 64K. I hope you had a good time. If you can like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.